Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe dignity and truth still matter in this world, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Clara Bennett. She was not supposed to understand a single word spoken in that room. That was what Victor Hale believed when he adjusted his silver cufflinks, stood beside Don Marcello Vitali's chair, and began translating for the most dangerous meeting the Vitali mansion had hosted in years. To Victor, Clara was only the maid, a quiet black woman in a gray uniform, moving silently between crystal glasses and polished mahogany, refilling coffee no one thanked her for, replacing ashtrays before anyone noticed they were full, keeping her eyes lowered the way servants were expected to do in houses built by men who never apologized. The conference room sat on the second floor of the mansion, behind 2 bronze doors and 4 armed guards. Rain tapped against the tall windows. The lights were low. The long table gleamed like dark water beneath the chandelier. At one end sat Don Marcello Vitali. He was 42, broad-shouldered, calm in the way storms are calm before they break. His black suit was perfectly tailored. His hands rested lightly on the arms of his chair, but everyone in that room knew those hands had built an empire no court had ever managed to touch. Across from him sat 3 foreign businessmen from Eastern Europe. Their faces were pale, their smiles thin, their eyes always moving. They spoke in Russian. Victor translated into English, and every man in the room trusted him. For 10 years, Victor had been Marcello's voice in rooms where one wrong sentence could cost millions, territory, or blood. He had translated contracts, threats, apologies, negotiations, and betrayals before anyone else recognized them. Marcello trusted Victor because Victor had never once seemed afraid. But that night, as Clara poured espresso into a white porcelain cup, she heard the Russian guest say something that made her hand stop midair. Delay the shipment. Police are watching the southern route. Victor smiled politely and translated. They say the southern route is clear. The shipment can move tonight. Clara's eyes lifted for half a second. No one noticed. The Russian man frowned slightly, as if confused by Victor's choice of words. Then he continued. If Vitali signs tonight, he walks directly into the trap. Victor turned toward Marcello and said smoothly, they are pleased to sign tonight. They respect your leadership. The room remained still, but Clara's heartbeat changed. She lowered the coffee pot carefully, making sure the porcelain did not tremble against the saucer. She had heard lies before. Small lies. Rich people's lies. The kind told over wine and legal documents. The kind polished enough to sound like manners. But this was different. This was not a mistake. Victor Hale was not mistranslating. He was burying the truth in plain sight. Clara stepped back toward the wall, her cloth folded over one arm, her face unreadable. She had spent most of her life learning how to become invisible when powerful people entered the room. Invisibility was safer. Invisibility paid rent. Invisibility kept doors open. But tonight, invisibility had placed her close enough to hear a betrayal. Victor glanced toward her. His mouth curved. Careful, Clara, he said in English, loud enough for the men near Marcello to hear. That table costs more than your entire neighborhood. A few of the capos chuckled. Clara did not answer. She wiped a drop of coffee from the table and lowered her eyes. Victor looked satisfied. He thought silence meant shame. He did not know silence could also be a locked door, keeping intelligence hidden from fools. Marcello did not laugh, but he did not defend her either. His eyes stayed on the Russian men. His empire was at stake. He had no time to notice the maid. And that was Victor's greatest advantage. He believed the only people who mattered were the ones sitting at the table. He never imagined that the person who would destroy him was standing behind him, holding a coffee tray. The Russian guest reached into his leather folder and removed the contract. Victor translated every sentence with perfect confidence. Every lie sounded clean. Every betrayal sounded loyal. Then Clara saw something small. Victor's left hand slipped into his jacket pocket. He pressed a button on a tiny black recorder, hidden beside his wine glass. Clara's breath slowed. He was not only translating. He was recording the meeting. For someone else. Outside, thunder rolled over the mansion. Inside, Don Marcello Vitali picked up a gold pen. And Clara Bennett understood that if he signed that contract, he would not be signing a business deal. He would be signing his own downfall. The room was full of powerful men, but only the maid knew the truth. And she had less than 1 minute to decide whether silence would save her or destroy them all. The room went still. Victor smiled. Marcelo uncapped the pen, and Clara took one quiet step forward. Clara Bennett had learned early that people only asked who you were when they believed you mattered. No one in the Vitali mansion had asked. When she first arrived 8 months earlier, carrying a small suitcase and wearing her only good coat, the head housekeeper gave her 3 rules before she had even stepped fully inside. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not ask about the men who come after midnight. And never, under any circumstances, enter Don Marcelo's private rooms unless summoned. Clara nodded to each rule as if she had not lived her entire life under rules made by people who mistook quiet women for weak ones. She was 32 years old, born in Baltimore, raised by a father who taught languages at a small college and a mother who cleaned offices at night so Clara could study without worrying about the electricity bill. Her father, Professor Samuel Bennett, believed language was more than words. Every language carries a soul, he used to tell her, tapping the kitchen table while she repeated phrases in French, Spanish, Italian, and Russian. If you listen closely enough, baby girl, people reveal who they are long before they mean to. By 16, Clara could read 3 languages fluently. By 21, she was studying international relations, dreaming of becoming an interpreter at the United Nations. By 24, the dream was gone. Her father got sick. The bills came first politely, then aggressively. Her mother's back gave out from years of labor. Clara left school, took 2 jobs, then 3. Translation work required degrees she never finished. Office jobs required references she did not have. So she cleaned hotel rooms, carried trays, folded laundry for people who left diamond earrings on bathroom counters, and still accused the staff when they misplaced them. She told herself survival was not failure. But some nights, when her hands smelled of bleach and her eyes burned from exhaustion, she wondered whether the world had quietly erased the girl she used to be. The Vitali mansion paid better than any job she had ever had. So Clara became what the house required: quiet, useful, unnoticed. Every morning, she polished floors beneath paintings worth more than her mother's apartment building. Every afternoon, she washed cups used by men who spoke about loyalty like it was a weapon. Every night, she returned to the small staff room near the laundry wing and studied old language books with cracked spines, because some part of her refused to let that girl disappear completely. No one knew. Not Mrs. Alvarez, the head housekeeper. Not the guards who opened doors without looking at her face. Not Victor Hale, who enjoyed making jokes in languages he assumed she could not understand. Especially not Don Marcelo Vitali. To Marcelo, Clara was a presence at the edge of rooms. A shadow with careful hands. She knew how he took his coffee, which glass he preferred for whiskey, which flowers he removed from the dining room, because their scent reminded him of a funeral he never spoke about. She knew he hated disorder. She knew he rarely raised his voice. And she knew men feared him more when he was quiet. But he did not know her. That was the arrangement. Powerful men were comfortable when service had no story. Victor Hale understood this better than anyone. He had built a career on proximity. He stood beside Marcelo in every meeting, whispering meanings into his ear, shaping worlds with sentences. Men who feared Marcelo respected Victor because Victor controlled the bridge between ignorance and understanding. But over the years, Victor had begun to believe the bridge belonged to him. He corrected people sharply, mocked accents, smiled at women like Clara as if their silence entertained him. Once, Clara had heard him tell a guard, "The help in this house could hear state secrets and still not know what they meant." The guard laughed. Clara carried towels past them without reacting. That was the first time she understood Victor's weakness. He confused education with appearance. He believed intelligence wore suits, spoke loudly, and sat close to power. He did not understand intelligence, could wear flat shoes, carry a mop bucket, and listen from the corners of rooms. Now, standing behind Don Marcelo with the rain trembling against the windows, Clara heard every false word Victor placed between the Russian guests and the man he claimed to serve. She remembered her father's voice. If you listen closely enough, people reveal who they are. Victor had revealed himself, and the truth had placed itself in Clara's hands. Marcelo's pen hovered above the contract. Victor leaned in, his voice low and smooth. "They are ready, Don Vitali. Sign, and the agreement is complete." Clara looked at the recorder beside Victor's glass, then at the contract, then at Marcelo. For 8 months, she had survived by staying invisible. But there are moments when survival asks for silence. And there are moments when dignity demands a sound. Clara stepped forward with the coffee tray. Not fast, not dramatic, just one quiet step. And for the first time since she entered the Vitali mansion, she made everyone in the room look at her. Victor noticed Clara moving before anyone else did. His eyes sharpened, but his smile stayed in place. That was one of Victor Hale's gifts. He could look calm while calculating damage. He could insult a man in one language and praise him in another. He could make betrayal sound like diplomacy. "Is there a problem?" he asked, not to Clara, but to the room. The question carried a warning. Clara understood it. The men at the table turned. A few guards shifted near the walls. One of Marcelo's capos, Enzo, frowned at her as if she had committed a crime by existing too close to the contract. Clara lowered her gaze. "More coffee, sir," she said softly. Victor laughed under his breath. "Not now." His tone was light, but his eyes were cold. Marcelo did not look up from the contract. "Let her pour." That was all he said. 2 words. Enough to let Clara reach the table. She moved carefully along the side, filling cups that were already nearly full. Her hands were steady, though every nerve in her body knew the danger of what she was about to do. Victor stood inches away. She could smell his expensive cologne, sharp and metallic. He bent slightly toward her and whispered, "You are interrupting something far above your understanding." Clara poured coffee into his cup. A single dark ripple spread across the surface. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale," she said. Her voice carried no anger. That unsettled him more than defiance would have. The Russian guest across the table watched them, eyes narrowing. He said something under his breath to the man beside him. Victor translated quickly. "They are admiring the efficiency of your staff, Don Vitali." Clara heard the real sentence. "She understands us." Her fingers tightened around the handle of the pot. Victor heard it too. For the first time that night, his smile faltered. Only for a heartbeat. But Clara saw it. Marcelo finally lifted his eyes. He looked first at Victor, then at Clara, then at the Russian men. The room changed temperature. Marcelo Vitali had survived too long by ignoring small shifts. A pause, a breath, a glance held too long. These were the details that kept men alive in his world. "What did he say?" Marcelo asked. Victor answered immediately. "He said your staff is very professional." Marcelo's expression did not move. His eyes stayed on Clara. "And you, Clara? Did you hear something different?" The sound of her name in his voice startled the room. Clara looked at him. For 8 months, she had believed Don Marcelo barely knew she existed. Yet he had remembered her name. Victor turned sharply. "Don Vitali, with respect, she does not speak." Marcelo raised one hand. Victor stopped. The silence that followed was heavy enough to press against Clara's chest. This was the moment. One sentence could save him. One sentence could ruin her. Because men like Marcelo did not simply accept accusations, especially not against someone who had stood beside him for 10 years. And men like Victor did not forgive humiliation from women they considered beneath them. Clara could feel the old instinct rising in her. Stay quiet. Keep the job. Pay your mother's rent. Walk away alive. But then she looked down and saw Marcelo's gold pin still resting against the paper. She saw the contract waiting. She saw Victor's recorder hidden near the glass. And she understood that silence was no longer neutral. Silence had become permission. Clara placed the coffee pot on the table. Very slowly, she reached for the silver spoon beside Victor's cup. Victor's eyes widened. "Clara," he said softly. This time, there was fear beneath the warning. She did not answer. She lifted the spoon, then let it slip from her fingers. It struck the marble floor with a clean, ringing sound. Sharp, bright, impossible to ignore. Every man in the room looked down. In that instant, as Victor's attention snapped toward the falling spoon, Clara's other, she picked up the small black recorder beside his wine glass and placed it in front of Don Marcelo. No speech, no accusation, no trembling finger pointed across the table. Just evidence. "Sit down quietly." Marcelo stared at it. Victor went pale. One of the guards took a step forward. "What is that?" Marcelo asked. Victor opened his mouth. No words came. Clara folded her hands in front of her. The Russian guest leaned back in his chair, suddenly very still. Marcelo picked up the recorder. His thumb hovered over the button. Victor tried to laugh. It came out thin. "Don Vitali, this is absurd. She must have found that somewhere. You know how staff can be." curious, confused, looking for attention. Clara did not look at him. She looked at Marcelo, and in her silence, he saw something Victor had never shown him. Not fear, not ambition, certainty. Marcelo pressed play. The recorder clicked. A burst of static filled the room. Then the Russian guest's voice emerged clearly. Victor's translation followed. 2 languages, 2 meanings, 1 betrayal. And by the time the first false sentence played aloud, Victor Hale's smile was gone. At first, no one moved. The recorder's tiny speaker filled the grand conference room with a truth so plain it seemed almost impossible that no one had seen it before. The Russian guest's voice came first, low and flat. Victor's voice followed, smooth as polished glass. But even the men who did not understand Russian could hear the rhythm was wrong. The guest spoke sharply, urgently, with the clipped tone of a warning. Victor translated with warmth, confidence, reassurance. Marcelo listened without blinking. Victor stood beside him, color draining from his face. The recording continued. The Russian guest said, "The southern route is compromised." Victor translated, "The southern route is secure." The guest said, "Police units have been informed." Victor translated, "There will be no interference." The guest said, "Once Vitali moves tonight, he will be exposed." Victor translated, "They are ready to honor the agreement tonight." A chair scraped against the floor. Enzo, Marcelo's oldest capo, stood slowly, his hand curling into a fist at his side. Victor raised both palms. "That device has been altered," he said quickly. "This is a setup. Don Marcelo, think. I have stood beside you for 10 years. 10 years. Are you going to believe a maid who probably does not even know what she heard?" There it was. The word. Maid. He said it like a locked door. Like a verdict. Like Clara's uniform had already testified against her. Several men looked at her. Not with laughter now, but doubt. Doubt was quieter than cruelty, but Clara had known it her whole life. Doubt when she applied for scholarships. Doubt when she corrected a teacher's pronunciation. Doubt when she sat in rooms where people assumed her place before learning her name. Marcelo turned off the recorder. The sudden silence was worse than the sound. "Clara," he said. Her name landed differently this time. Not as an order. As a question. "Do you speak Russian?" Victor scoffed. "Don Vitali." Marcelo did not look at him. "I asked her." Clara lifted her chin. "Yes, sir." The room shifted again. "How well?" "Well enough to know he has not translated one complete sentence honestly tonight." Victor's face tightened. The Russian guests exchanged glances. Marcelo leaned back in his chair. His expression remained controlled, but Clara could see the storm gathering behind his eyes. "Then translate," he said. The words struck the room like a gavel. Clara looked at the Russian men. One of them smirked faintly, perhaps expecting her to stumble, perhaps expecting the scene to collapse under its own audacity. Clara stepped closer to the table. Her voice was quiet, precise. She repeated the first Russian sentence in English, then the second, then the third. No embellishment, no drama, no attempt to make herself the hero of the room. She simply opened the door Victor had kept locked. With every sentence, Marcelo's face hardened. With every correction, Victor's breathing grew shallower. Clara translated the warning about the police, the changed delivery route, the payment from the rival Moretti family, the plan to let Marcelo sign, move his shipment, and walk directly into a federal net while his enemies seized the territory he left exposed. When she finished, no one spoke. The rain against the window seemed louder now. Marcelo slowly turned toward Victor. "You told me they were loyal." Victor swallowed. "Because they are lying now," he said. "They realize she exposed nothing, so they are inventing." Clara interrupted him for the first time. No, one word. Soft. But it cut through the room. Victor's eyes flashed with rage. "Excuse me." Clara looked at Marcelo, not Victor. "There is more on the recorder, sir. He spoke after you stepped out earlier." "In English?" Victor froze. That was the first true confession. Not spoken. Shown in the way his body betrayed him. Marcelo pressed play again. Static. Then Victor's voice. "No translation needed. She suspects nothing," Victor said on the recording. "Vitali trusts every word I give him. By tomorrow morning, he will be finished." A sound moved through the room. Not a gasp. Something colder. Recognition. Marcelo set the recorder down. He did not shout. He did not slam the table. He simply looked at the man he had trusted for a decade and saw him clearly for the first time. Victor tried to speak. Marcelo raised one finger, and Victor's mouth closed. The room went silent. Not because anyone was confused, because everyone understood. The maid had not made an accusation. She had brought the truth into the room and let it stand on its own. For 10 years, Victor Hale had stood close enough to power that he began to mistake its shadow for his own. Now, with one small recorder on the table and one quiet woman standing beside it, that shadow vanished. Marcelo did not look away from him. "Who paid you?" he asked. Victor's lips parted. No answer came. That was answer enough. Enzo stepped forward, but Marcelo lifted his hand again. The room obeyed him instantly. Even betrayed, even surrounded by men waiting for permission to act, Marcelo remained perfectly still. That stillness frightened Victor more than rage. "Don Marcelo," Victor said, voice cracking slightly, "please. You must understand. The Moretus made threats. They knew things. They knew about my sister, about my debts. I made one mistake." Clara watched him carefully. One mistake. It was amazing how men renamed betrayal when consequence finally entered the room. Victor turned toward her. "And you," he said, anger sharpening his voice. "You have no idea what you've done. Do you think he will protect you? Do you think this world rewards women like you for speaking out? You should have stayed with your mop." The words hung in the air. A few months earlier, those words might have reached the part of Clara that still feared being put back in her place. But something had changed. Maybe it changed when she heard the first lie. Maybe when Marcelo said her name. Maybe when the recorder played the truth and no one could unhear it. Clara did not flinch. Marcelo noticed. So did everyone else. Victor saw it too, and desperation made him crueler. "She is staff," he said to Marcelo. "You do not know her. You do not know what she wants. Maybe she works for them. Maybe this whole performance is part of the trap." Marcelo turned slowly toward Clara. For one moment, the old fear returned. Because Victor was right about one thing. Marcelo did not know her. He did not know about her father's books, her unfinished degree, the hospital bills, the nights she translated old newspaper articles just to prove to herself her mind had not gone dull from exhaustion. He knew how she poured coffee, how she moved through rooms, how she kept silence. But he did not know her. Marcelo studied her face. "Why did you not speak immediately?" he asked. The question was not unkind, but it was heavy. Clara answered honestly. "Because men like him have spent my whole life teaching me that truth needs permission when it comes from someone like me." No one moved. Victor's jaw tightened. Marcelo's eyes changed. Clara continued. "If I had shouted, he would have called me emotional. If I had accused him, he would have called me confused. If I had translated without proof, every man in this room would have looked at my uniform before listening to my words." The silence deepened. "So I let him speak first," she said. "Then I let the recording speak after him." Marcelo leaned back. For the first time that night, something like respect crossed his face. Not softness, not pity, respect. The rare kind powerful men give only when they realize someone has done what they themselves might not have had the patience to do. Victor saw it and panicked. "Don Marcelo, she is manipulating you." Marcelo looked at him. "No," he said quietly. "You manipulated me." The sentence landed like a door locking. Victor's face collapsed. Marcelo turned to Enzo. "Take him downstairs. No noise. No spectacle. I want every account he touched frozen before sunrise. Every call he made in the last 6 months traced. Every message recovered." Enzo nodded. 2 guards moved toward Victor. Victor stumbled back. "Marcelo, please." "After everything," Marcelo's voice cut through him. "After everything, you chose to sell my house using my own trust as currency." The guards took Victor by the arms. He looked once more at Clara. Hatred burned in his eyes. But beneath it was something more humiliating. Fear. Not of Marcelo. Of her. Because Clara Bennett had done what no rival boss, no investigator, no armed enemy had managed to do. She had listened. She had understood. And she had waited until the truth could not be denied. As Victor was let out, the Russian guests sat frozen across the table. Their confidence had evaporated. Without Victor's lies protecting them, they looked much smaller. Marcelo picked up the contract. He tore it once. Then again. The sound of ripping paper filled the room. He placed the pieces on the table. Then he looked at Clara. She instinctively reached for the coffee tray, ready to step backward into the role she knew. Marcelo saw the movement. "Leave it," he said. Clara stopped. Marcelo gestured to the empty chair beside him. Victor's chair. Sit down. The room held its breath. Clara stared at him. Sir. Marcelo's eyes did not waver. You heard what none of us heard. You saw what none of us saw. You saved every man at this table from walking blind into a trap. He pushed the chair out with his foot. So sit. Clara looked at the chair. For 8 months, she had cleaned around it. Now the room waited for her to take it. Slowly, she removed the folded cloth from her arm and set it on the table. Then Clara Bennett sat down, and no one dared laugh. The chair felt heavier than it looked. Clara sat with her hands folded in her lap, aware of every eye on her, every breath, every judgment moving silently around the table. She had not wanted attention. That was the part none of them would understand. People who had always been seen imagined visibility as power. Clara knew it could also be danger. A spotlight could warm you, or it could mark you. Marcelo turned toward the Russian guests. Now, he said, we begin again. The lead negotiator, a man with silver hair and cold blue eyes, adjusted his tie. Without Victor beside him, his confidence returned in a different form. He looked at Clara with open disbelief. In Russian, he said, this is ridiculous. You let a servant sit at your table and pretend she understands international matters. Marcelo did not react. He looked at Clara. She translated exactly. This is ridiculous, she said calmly. He says, you have allowed a servant to sit at your table and pretend she understands international matters. A muscle moved in Marcelo's jaw. The Russian man's eyes widened. Clara looked back at him. In Russian, her voice steady, she added, and I would advise you not to insult the person currently making sure you are understood. For the first time that night, one of Marcelo's men smiled. Not mockery, admiration. The Russian guest leaned back, reassessing her. Clara did not enjoy the moment. She simply continued. Marcelo folded his hands on the table. Ask him who else knew. Clara translated. The man hesitated. Marcelo did not need the language to understand hesitation. Clara watched the guest's face, the flicker of calculation in his eyes, the way he glanced toward the second man at his right before answering. He says only Victor, Clara translated. Then she paused. Marcelo noticed. But, he asked. Clara looked at the guest. He looked at the man beside him before answering. He is lying, or at least protecting someone. The second man stiffened. Marcelo's gaze moved to him. The room's balance shifted again. This was no longer only about language. It was about attention. The kind of attention Clara had spent years sharpening because people forgot she was there. When you are invisible, you learn faces. You learn who hides guilt behind anger, who smiles when frightened, who touches their ring before lying, who looks toward the door before they run. Marcelo saw it now. Clara was not merely translating. She was reading the room in a way even his trained men had missed. Continue, he said. For the next 20 minutes, Clara translated every question, every answer, every evasion. Slowly, the truth widened. Victor had not acted alone. The Moretti family had contacted him through an intermediary. The Russians had agreed to help stage the trap in exchange for protection and access to Vitali ports. A corrupt officer had been paid to ensure the police arrived at precisely the right moment. Marcelo listened. He asked fewer questions than Clara expected, but every question cut deeper than the last. Names, dates, bank accounts, phone numbers, routes. The guests resisted at first. Then they began giving pieces. Small ones, then larger. Fear loosened what pride tried to hold, and Clara translated all of it. At one point, Enzo placed a notepad in front of her. She began writing. Names in English, then Russian, then phonetic spellings so Marcelo's men could track them correctly. The pen moved quickly in her hand. Marcelo watched. Not her face this time. Her hand. The ease with which she moved between alphabets. The calm structure of her notes. The clarity of a mind that had been hidden under a uniform he had never bothered to question. Something uncomfortable settled in his chest. Shame. It was not a feeling Marcelo welcomed. He had always believed himself fair, at least by the standards of his world. He paid his staff well. He did not allow men to harass women in his house. He punished open disrespect. But he had still failed to see Clara. He had allowed Victor's little insults to pass as background noise. He had accepted the convenience of her silence. He had taken service without asking what intelligence stood behind it. And tonight, that intelligence had saved him. The interrogation ended near midnight. The Russian guests were escorted out under guard, not harmed, but no longer free men in the way they had entered. When the doors closed, Only Marcelo, Clara, Enzo, and 2 capos remained. The torn contract lay in pieces on the table. Victor's recorder sat beside it. Marcelo looked at Clara. Where did you learn Russian? The question was simple, but Clara heard what lived beneath it. Who are you? She looked down at her hands. My father taught me. He was a professor. Marcelo waited. Clara continued. I studied languages in college. I left before finishing. Why? Life became more expensive than dreams. No one spoke. Marcelo nodded once, slowly. Then he stood. Every man in the room stood with him. Clara started to rise too. Marcelo stopped her. No, he said. She froze. He looked around the room, making sure each man understood the words before he spoke them. From tonight forward, no one in this house speaks over Clara Bennett. No one mocks her. No one questions her place at this table unless they have earned more trust than she earned tonight. His eyes moved to Enzo. Is that clear? Enzo bowed his head. Clear. Marcelo looked back at Clara. And tomorrow morning, we discuss your new position. Clara blinked. My position? Marcelo picked up Victor's recorder. The one you should have had before any of us were smart enough to notice. The rain outside had stopped. But inside Clara's chest, something long frozen began to loosen. Not because a powerful man had given her permission to matter, but because, for once, the truth had entered the room wearing her face, and no one could send it back to the kitchen. By sunrise, the mansion had changed. Not visibly. The marble still shone. The guards still stood at their posts. The kitchen still smelled of coffee, toasted bread, and expensive silence. But Clara felt the difference the moment she entered the staff corridor. Conversations stopped. Faces turned. Yesterday, she had been the woman people passed without greeting. Today, she was a story. Some looked at her with curiosity. Some with admiration. Some with discomfort. Respect unsettles people when they have built habits around your humiliation. Mrs. Alvarez, the head housekeeper, stood near the pantry holding a clipboard. Her sharp eyes softened when Clara approached. Don Vitali wants you in his study after breakfast, she said. Clara nodded. Then Mrs. Alvarez did something she had never done before. She touched Clara's arm gently. You did well. 3 words. Clara nearly looked away. Praise was sometimes harder to carry than insult. Insult was familiar. Praise asked you to believe something better about yourself. By 9 o'clock, Clara stood outside Marcelo's private study. The door was open. She knocked anyway. Marcelo looked up from his desk. Come in. The study was different from the conference room. Warmer. Shelves of old books lined the walls. A bronze lamp cast amber light across stacks of documents. On one side table sat a framed photograph of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. Marcelo's late mother, Clara guessed. He gestured to the chair across from him. Clara sat. This time, the chair did not feel like stolen territory. Marcelo folded his hands. I had Enzo verify your background. Clara's spine stiffened. Of course he had. Power always investigated what surprised it. Marcelo noticed her reaction. I found what Victor never bothered to imagine, he said. Academic records. Language awards. Professors who remembered you. A scholarship you gave up. Clara looked at the floor. I gave it up because my father was dying. I know. The softness in his voice made her look up. Marcelo opened a folder and turned it toward her. Inside were copies of old transcripts, letters, documents she had not seen in years. Her name typed neatly across. Pages from a life that felt almost imaginary now. Clara touched one page with her fingertips. For a moment, she was 20 again, sitting in a library with a notebook open, believing the world would make room for her if she worked hard enough. Then she was back in the study of a Mafia boss, wearing a maid's uniform, with bleach still faintly under her nails. Marcelo watched her carefully. I owe you an apology, he said. Clara's hand stopped. That was not what she expected. Marcelo Vitali did not look like a man built for apologies. He continued anyway. Victor disrespected you in my house. More than once. I heard enough to know I should have stopped it earlier. Clara said nothing. I told myself silence meant it was not serious, he said. That was convenient for me. Outside the study, footsteps passed and faded. Clara looked at him. Most people call it harmless when it is not aimed at them. Marcelo accepted the sentence without defense. That was the first thing he did that truly surprised her. He did not explain, did not justify, did not remind her of his power. He simply nodded. You are right. The words settled between them. Then he pushed a second document across the desk. This is an employment contract, not housekeeping. Interpreter and strategic language consultant. Full salary. Security protection. Your own office. Access only to meetings I approve personally. Clara stared at the page. The number at the bottom was larger than anything she had earned in a year. Her first instinct was suspicion. Life had trained her to distrust sudden gifts. What is the condition? She asked. Marcelo almost smiled. Good. You should ask that. He leaned back. The condition is honesty. Even when it embarrasses me. Especially then. Clara studied him. And if my honesty says no? Then you walk out with 6 months severance and my protection for as long as Victor's allies remain a threat. Clara looked at him for a long time. She wanted to say yes immediately. Her mother needed medication. Rent was late. Security was a miracle people like her rarely received. But dignity required more than need. What about the staff? She asked. Marcelo's brow moved slightly. What about them? I will not become a symbol used to frighten them. I will not sit upstairs while women downstairs are still treated like furniture. Marcelo's face changed. Enzo, standing near the wall, looked at her as if she had just stepped onto thin ice. But Clara had already crossed worse. Marcelo's fingers tapped once against the desk. What do you want? Clear rules. No insults. No touching. No threats disguised as jokes. A way for staff to report mistreatment without losing their jobs. The room was very quiet. Then Marcelo nodded. Done. Clara blinked. That easily? No, he said. Not easily. But correctly. She looked back at the contract. For the first time, the paper in front of her did not feel like a trap. It felt like a door. Clara picked up the pen. Her father's voice moved through her memory. Every language carries a soul. She signed her name. Not as the quiet maid. Not as a woman begging for a place. As Clara Bennett. And when Marcelo took the signed contract back, he did not smile. He did something more important. He stood and offered his hand. Clara looked at it. Then she shook it. The room did not erupt. No music played. No one clapped. But something had been restored in that quiet exchange. A woman who had spent years being unseen had not been rescued. She had been recognized. And there is a difference. Victor Hale's final lie arrived 3 days later. It came inside a white envelope, hand-delivered to the mansion gate by a courier who vanished before the guards could ask questions. The envelope contained one photograph. Clara's mother, standing outside her apartment building, holding a grocery bag. On the back, written in Victor's sharp handwriting, were 6 words. Tell the truth again, Maid. Clara read the words once. Then again. Her hands did not shake until the second reading. Marcelo was in a security briefing when Enzo brought her into the office. The moment he saw her face, the conversation stopped. Clara placed the photograph on his desk. No one spoke for several seconds. Marcelo picked it up. His expression emptied. That was when Clara understood why men feared him. Not because he became loud. Because all warmth left him so completely that the room seemed to lose light. Where did this come from? He asked. Enzo answered. Marcelo looked at Clara. Is your mother safe? I called her, Clara said. She is inside. She thinks I am overreacting. You are not. The words were immediate, firm. Clara gripped the back of a chair. For years, danger had been something she endured privately. Bills, evictions, illness, men who followed too closely at night, employers who smiled with too many teeth. But this danger had followed her because she told the truth. A familiar guilt rose inside her. Maybe she should have stayed silent. Maybe saving powerful men always cost powerless women more. Marcelo seemed to read the thought before she spoke it. Do not do that, he said. Clara looked up. Do what? Blame yourself for the character of a coward. The sentence stopped her. Marcelo turned to Enzo. Move her mother to the safe apartment on Ashland. 2 women on protection detail, not men. Tell Mrs. Bennett it is a plumbing emergency if you have to. I want Victor found. Enzo nodded and left. Clara remained standing. Marcelo's voice softened slightly. He is trying to make you regret being seen. Clara looked at the photograph. He knows where she lives. Yes. He can reach people I love. Yes. Marcelo did not lie to comfort her. Strangely, that made her trust him more. What happens when truth is not enough? She asked. Marcelo looked at the torn contract still preserved in a folder on his desk. Then we make sure the lie has nowhere left to hide. That evening, Clara sat in the surveillance room with Marcelo's analysts. Not hidden, not sent away for her own good. Seated in front of monitors, listening to recovered calls, reading intercepted messages, translating fragments of Russian and Italian as Victor's network began to reveal itself. He had not disappeared alone. He had run to the Morettas, offering them one last service. Clara. Not because she controlled money, not because she had weapons, but because she had credibility now. Victor understood something many men still did not. A woman who had been underestimated once could become dangerous forever. Hours passed. Coffee went cold beside Clara's keyboard. At 1:17 a.m., she heard Victor's voice on an intercepted call. They trust her now, he said. Use that. Send a message from her phone. Make it look like she arranged the meeting. Vitaly will doubt her. Men like him always doubt people like her eventually. Clara closed her eyes. There it was. Victor's last weapon. Not violence. Doubt. He wanted to return her to the place where every truth from her mouth needed extra proof. Marcelo stood behind her, listening. The call continued. Victor named the location of the meeting. An abandoned import office near the river. He told the Morettas where to send the forged message, how to frame Clara as a double agent, how to make Marcelo wonder whether the maid who exposed one betrayal had been planning another. The recording ended. No one moved. Clara turned slowly toward Marcelo. She expected questions, a flicker of suspicion, even a careful distance. Instead, Marcelo said, "He still thinks I am stupid enough to trust his words over your silence." Clara's throat tightened. For the first time that night, her composure almost broke. Marcelo looked at his men. "We let Victor send the message." Enzo frowned. "Boss." Marcelo's eyes stayed on Clara. Then Clara writes the reply. The room turned toward her. Marcelo asked, "Can you make him believe you are afraid?" Clara looked back at the screen, where Victor's voice had tried to bury her again. She thought of the spoon hitting the marble, the recorder on the table, her mother's photograph. Then she sat straighter. "No," she said. Marcelo's brow lifted. Clara's eyes steadied. "But I can make him believe I am alone." And that was the moment Victor Hale lost the last game he would ever play with her name. The abandoned import office near the river smelled of dust, rust, and old rain. Broken windows looked out over black water. A single hanging light swung gently from the ceiling, pushed by wind slipping through cracks in the walls. Clara stood in the center of the room wearing a dark coat over her work clothes. No jewelry, no weapon, no visible fear. To anyone watching from a distance, she looked alone. That was the lie Victor needed to believe. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. A message from Marcelo. One word. Ready. Clara did not reply. Silence had served her before. Tonight, it would serve her again. The door opened at 11:03 p.m. Victor entered first. He looked different without the mansion around him. Smaller. His tailored coat was damp from the rain. His hair, usually perfect, had fallen across his forehead. Behind him stood two Moretti men, nervous enough to keep glancing toward the windows. Victor smiled when he saw Clara. "There she is," he said. "The brilliant maid." Clara did not move. Victor walked closer, slow and theatrical, as if trying to reclaim the stage she had taken from him. "You should have accepted your little promotion and stayed grateful," he said. "But women like you always make the same mistake. You think being noticed means being safe." Clara looked at him. "No," she said. "I know being noticed means being responsible." His smile twitched. "You ruined my life. You sold your life long before I entered that room." The Moretti men shifted uncomfortably. Victor's eyes hardened. "I gave Marcelo 10 years. 10 years of loyalty. You gave him 10 years of edited truth." Victor stepped closer. "Do you know what your problem is, Clara? You still believe truth matters by itself. It doesn't. Truth needs power. Truth needs men like Vitaly to give it weight." Clara's expression did not change. "My father taught me something different." Victor laughed. "Your father is dead." The words were meant to wound. They did. But Clara did not give him the satisfaction of seeing where. Instead, she reached into her pocket and removed a small black recorder. Victor froze. For one beautiful second, the past returned to his face. The conference room. The spoon. The sound of his own betrayal playing back before powerful men. Clara pressed stop. A tiny red light blinked on the device. "Truth does not need power," she said. "It needs memory." The side doors opened. Marcelo's men entered without shouting. No chaos. No dramatic violence. Just doors opening. Body stilling. Choices ending. Victor turned toward the exit, but Enzo was already there. The Moretti men raised their hands immediately. Victor looked back at Clara, disbelief cracking his face. You planned this. Clara slid the recorder back into her pocket. No, she said. You did. I only translated your intentions. Then Marcello stepped from the shadows. Victor's face went gray. Don Marcello Vitali did not rush. He crossed the warehouse floor with the same calm he carried in boardrooms and funeral halls. His eyes moved briefly to Clara, checking without words that she was unharmed. She nodded once. Only then did he look at Victor. You were right about one thing, Marcello said. Victor swallowed. Truth does need people willing to stand beside it. He stopped beside Clara. And tonight I do. Victor's mouth opened, but no argument came out strong enough to survive the room. Marcello gestured to Enzo. Take them. The men were led away. Victor struggled once, not violently enough to matter, just desperately enough to reveal the man beneath the arrogance. As he passed Clara, he whispered, You'll always be just a maid. Clara looked at him with calm eyes. No, she said. That was just the only thing you were capable of seeing. For the first time, Victor had no translation. Weeks later, the Vitali mansion hosted another meeting. Same conference room, same mahogany table, same rain tapping softly against the windows. But one thing had changed. At Don Marcello's right hand sat Clara Bennett, not standing behind him, not carrying coffee, not waiting to be dismissed. A folder lay open in front of her, filled with contracts in 3 languages. Men twice her age waited for her to speak before they signed anything. On a small shelf behind Marcello's chair sat a silver spoon in a glass case. Visitors sometimes asked about it. Marcello never gave the full story. He only said, That was the sound that saved my empire. One evening, after the guests had gone and the house had settled into quiet, Marcello found Clara standing before the case. You ever regret it? He asked. Clara did not turn, exposing him, being heard. She looked at the spoon, then at the room where she had once been invisible. Sometimes, she said honestly, being heard costs more than people admit. Marcello nodded. And still, Clara's eyes steadied. And still, silence should never belong to the liar. Marcello looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the quiet respect of a man who had learned the difference between power and dignity, he bowed his head. Not deeply, not theatrically. Enough. Clara Bennett turned back toward the table. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, the room was silent. But this time, silence did not sound like fear. It sounded like respect. And that day, the world remembered what dignity looks like.